The Yom Kippur War of 1973 saw the mass use of tanks, which led to many iconic, famous, and spectacular tank battles. Today we're going to be taking a look at one of the many tanks used in such battles, the Sho't. Translated from Hebrew to English, it simply means whip, but it would live up to its name just as it had 6 years prior in the Six-Day War of 1967. The tank. The Sho't and its variants are imported British-made Centurion MBTs. The Israelis purchased different variants of the tank, and the first ones arrived in 1959. These were most likely Centurion Mark IIIs and Mark Vs, which were equipped with the 84mm 20-pounder OQF Mark I cannon and the Rolls-Royce Meteor 4B engine. The 84mm cannon was capable of firing the Sho't Mark I armor-piercing capped ballistic capped shell, or APBCBC for short. This was a solid shot shell, meaning it contained little to none high-explosive components in the shell, unlike its armor-piercing, high-explosive and armor-piercing high-explosive ballistic capped, APHE and APHEBC counterparts. The shell had a projectile mass of 9.1 kilograms and could pierce 232mm of armor at 10 meters at a 0-degree angle, and a maximum of 173mm at 2,000 meters or 2 kilometers. The cannon could also carry the Shell Mark I HE high explosive. This was mainly used for infantry and light tanks, or IFVs. It also carried the 20-pounder Shell SS Mark I, which was a smoke shell. Arguably the best round the tank could carry was the Sho't Mark III, which was an armor-piercing discarding sabot shell. This basically was a metal rod in a shell that, when fired, exited the shell and flew at a high velocity towards its target, increasing penetration rates. It could penetrate 285mm of armor from 10 meters and 198mm from 2,000 meters or 2 kilometers. The shell had a projectile mass of 3.2 kilograms and was a reliable ammo type. From 1963 onwards, the Israelis began to replace the 84mm cannon with a new Roll Ordnance 105mm L7 cannon. These tanks would be given the name Sho't Cow. The cow was because of the engine. They were also fitted with the Allison AVDS 1790 2A diesel engine, mated to the Allison CD850-6 transmission. The original tanks that had not been upgraded were simply called Sho't or Sho't Meteor, deriving from the Meteor engine. The L7 and or L7A1, depending on the variant, could carry the Sho't L28A1 APDS shell that could penetrate 303mm of armor from 10 meters and 252mm from 2,000 meters or 2 kilometers. It had a projectile mass of 4 kilograms. The other APDS shell it carried was the M728 shell that was used more widely on the Israeli tanks. It had less penetration, a maximum of 265mm. Another round they could fire was the M456 HFS round, high explosive anti-tank fin stabilized, which had a maximum penetration of 400mm and a mass of 10.5 kilograms. It also carried the new HESH shell, or high explosive squash head. This shell had a squash head that melted through the armor and then exploded with a tremendous effect. It could penetrate 127mm of armor. The invasion. On October 6, 1973, the Arab coalition, which consisted of Syrian and Egyptian forces, advanced into Israel via the Suez Canal and the Golan Heights after crossing their corresponding ceasefire lines. This came to a surprise for the Israelis, as the Yom Kippur was a holy holiday. The Egyptian forces quickly occupied the eastern bank of the Suez Canal. The Egyptians then moved into the Sinai Peninsula and the Syrians and Golan Heights. After 3 days of heavy fighting, the Israelis managed to halt the Egyptian advance, resulting in a military stalemate. The Syrians were then pushed back to the pre-war ceasefire lines, and then the Israelis began a 4-day counter-offensive deep into Syria. Within a week, Israeli artillery shells were falling upon the outskirts of Damascus. The Egyptians began to push for 2 strategic mountain passes deep within the Sinai Peninsula, but were repelled, and Israeli forces counterattacked by crossing the Suez Canal into Egypt and headed towards Suez City. On the 22nd of October, an initial ceasefire was brokered by the United Nations, and by the 25th the war was over. The Sho't was one of the most used tanks in the war alongside M48 Patterns and M60s, as well as the older M51 Super Sherman tanks. The most famous use of the Sho't was in the Valley of Tears in the Golan Heights, where it was used to great effect against larger numbers of Soviet-made T-54s, T-55s, and T-62s, used by largely mixed experienced crews. Some were veterans of the 1967 war, others were conscripts. An example would be when on the night of October 6th, a single shot commanded by Reservist Lieutenant V. Greengold engaged a 30-tank-strong column for the Syrian 51st Independent Tank Brigade. Using the hills as both cover, ambush positions, and firing positions, he and his crew swiftly defeated 6 enemy tanks and sent the rest of the T-55s into retreat without them firing a single round. His next engagement was at Nafar Base, where he and his crew claimed multiple victories as they defended the base. They were the only surviving tank out of 11 sent to the base after they sent out a call for backup. He even took out 10 more tanks in the dead of night, making the Syrians believe there was a much bigger force. Estimates put his number of kills upwards of 60 during his 30-plus hours and multiple shots he commanded. He was awarded the Medal of Valor, Israel's highest military medal award. He was one of 8 who got the medal during the war. In the early stages of the war, the Sho't proved to be weak against RPG-2s and RPG-7s and the Sega-guided missiles which Egyptian forces used in large numbers during the crossing of the Bar-Lev line. It was estimated the Israelis lost 40% of their southern armoured groups during the first 2 days of the war. During the war, the Israelis lost an estimated 1,100 tanks. In conclusion, the Shots played a major role in the Yom Kippur War, knocking out scores of Arab tanks and ultimately defending their country and invading the invaders. The Shots and their crews proved vital in the defense of Israel during the wars to come.